All right, so you see the lovely parts right here. Once it's a little better light and all cleaned up, the end little bit will be waste, so don't stress about what that looks like on a couple of these. But yeah, this will be good. The only thing I say, I'm gonna mill these flat on one face, flip it, mill it flat on the other face. And so I'll have something to grab with a wrench. A lot of times if I make these nuts, I'll make them with a drilled hole so I can actually turn them with a pin. But this time we'll actually make some flats for it. Now also, once I turn my light on for this mill, the lighting will change dramatically here. So if you see that a bunch, don't stress. Okay, let's get to it. It may look a little super ghetto with a piece of wood in there, but here's what I'm doing to register. I've milled that flat face, you can see right there on one, okay? And then now I'm gonna register that flat face down and mill the other side and then repeat, right? That way I get the shape that I want. So we'll skip some of the milling here and I'll show you the end result in just a second. All right, so I have it in the vise the opposite way now. So I've got two facets on the sides. I know it's hard to see in this light, but I'll have two facets on the sides, and then now I can put it in my vise horizontally and take the last two faces off in the same pattern. So I'll take one, flip it as a reference line, and one. And that way I get a square nut. So let's mill some of these up. Yeah, looking good. All right, last face, and then we'll be good to go. All right, here we are back with our two rods that we have segmented and put our facets on. And so now what I'm gonna do is put them back in the lathe. I'm gonna drill my holes and cut them off. I'll probably drill one at a time, take out a lathe, cut it off. Now, since I don't use a parting tool per se, I'm gonna have to try and set that up. But if I don't, it's just a lot of work back and forth to the mill, or sorry, to the lathe, to the bandsaw. So I will probably not film this. I'm just gonna drill holes. I'll film one, but then I'm not gonna film all the rest because I have to take the camera back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So that'll be what it is. I'm gonna actually just drill them and we'll cut them off. Little order change of operations. I've got them all cut out. I'm doing them one at a time. So I'm gonna center drill them all the way through, and then thread them. And while they're here, I'll round off the edge. So I'll do one of these real quick. 18 more to go.
All right, after some cleanup, we have a pile of nuts we've made. They're all threaded, ready to go. So now let's mill out some hooks. All right, here's where we find ourselves. These are our hooks that we threaded. We have our nuts over here. Now, what I need to do, here's my thought process, is I want a little bit of extra space in here. I don't want this, when it pulls down, to bend in. And anything, I want it to come out a little bit so that I have room for these to move a little bit. I don't want them to be super, super tight. So for that to happen, I'm going to put a flat on the back side of every one of these. And if I can do that, if I can get this to sit flat against there, that also saves me from having to bend over the top of that little piece of metal, especially being this thick and not being brass. Most hooks are brass, and it's a lot easier to bend over. This 3/16 steel, I'm not going to be able to bend over that tiny of a point. Now I could heat it up and forge it, but that would have been a whole process to go through. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to put a flat on there. That creates the top of the hook that I can then shape this part. I'll then make corresponding notches that they fit into. But I want to make sure I make this first. So we have 18 hooks plus the tailpiece that I'm just going to thin down. That way I can weld on the tailpiece. So that way it's adjustable. So we'll get started, but that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pinch this in the vise with a piece of leather. I'm nervous to actually put it through the nut, like so. One second. I'm nervous to put it through the nut and put that in the vise, because then as this gets milled, I think it's just going to spin, right? So I'll get a piece of leather, clamp it in the vise. We will mill it up, the slots, and I think I'm going to try and file by hand in a little bit the kind of angle for what I want to do in there. I don't want it to be dead flat. I want it to have an angle so it pulls in, not out. So, long story short, we're going to mill some flats on all of these pieces, and that'll be that. All right, so here's my process, and this is really a weird situation that calls for weird solutions. So I'm leaving that top like we talked about so I can mold it over. I'm having to make a gap. I have the cutest little set of calipers. They're only like 2.5 inches long, maybe 3 inches long. But I can measure the width that I need to make sure it fits the rim. And then I'm going down until I'm actually halfway, and I can measure my thickness of my rod to make sure that I'm not going too deep. And once it starts getting smaller, obviously I stop. So this was the first one. I've got it all set up. You can see I've got a piece of little red leather in there, protecting the threads. This little shim is not supporting too much, but what it basically is doing is keeping everything level as it sticks out, and any downward pressure doesn't really affect it too much. I wouldn't like normally going out this far from a vise, especially in milling operations, but I'm staying center, which is really unusual as well. Normally you take a pass halfway through or the other side, but by passing this way close to the bar and then running through the center, I'm keeping the chatter down on the bar here, since it is only 3/16 of an inch. So I just take little passes and mill it out. And so now I have to do all the rest of these. So let's take this out. It's cool enough because it does heat up. Also have this cute little level, right? And one of these little boxes just to double check everything. It's not super accurate by any means. This is the main accuracy, but I just like to check everything. So I can take this little fella out now, like so. I'll clean up all the threads, and there we go. Okay, you can see our little hook. All right, lots more to go. So let me try and mill these out.